हरे कृष्ण ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय श्री प्रभुपाद की जय Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in story from chapter 50 King Yayāti Canto 9. In the seventh generation after Ayu, the son of Pururava, there appeared Dhanvantari, the incarnation of the Lord and inaugurator of the medical science. King Nahusha, another son of Ayu, had 6 sons named Yati, Yayāti, Sangyati, Ayati, Biyati, and Kriti. Knowing that the acceptance of the royal throne makes one blind to self realization, Yati refused to accept the rule of the kingdom, even though his father offered it to him. Because Agastya Rishi cursed Nahusa after he had molested Indra's wife, he fell down from heaven and accepted the body of a python. Consequently, Yayati became the king and allowed his 4 younger brothers to rule the 4 directions. Once upon a time, Sarmishtha, the daughter of King Brishaparva, who was innocent but angry by nature, was walking in the palace garden along with Devjani, the daughter of Sukracharya, and thousands of other girlfriends. The garden was full of flowering trees and inhabited by sweetly singing birds, and when the girls came to the shore of a lotus pond, they decided to play in the water. After leaving their clothes on the shore, the girls entered the lake and began enjoying themselves by throwing water upon one another and swimming about. Then suddenly the lotus eyed young girls saw Lord Shiva pass by, seated on the back of his bull carrier along with his wife Parvati. Ashamed at their nakedness, the girls quickly got out of the water and began covering themselves with their garments. At this time, Sarmishta unknowingly put on Devjani's dress. At this time, Sarmishta unknowingly put on Devjani's dress. When the daughter of Sukracharya understood this, she angrily rebuked the princess by saying, "Oh, just see what this maid servant Sarmishta has done. Disregarding all etiquette, she has put on my dress just like a dog that snatches ghee meant for use in sacrifice. We are among the qualified Brahmanas who have created the universe by their austerity and who always keep the absolute truth within the core of their hearts. Because of the Brahmanas are the only worshipable objects within this world. Not only the great demigods offer them prayers, but even the Supreme Lord Himself. And yet, although this and even the Supreme Lord Himself. And yet, although this girl's father is our disciple, she has put on my dress, exactly like a Sudra trying to take charge of Vedic knowledge. Sarmishta became very angry after being rebuked with such cruel words. While breathing heavily and biting her lower lip, she replied to Devjani, "You beggar, without knowing your actual position, why do you unnecessarily talk so much? Don't you all wait at our father's house, depending upon us for your livelihood, just like crows?" After retaliating with these unkind words, infuriated Sarmishta took away all Devjani's clothes, threw her into a well, and then returned home along with her friends. Soon thereafter, while wandering in the forest on a hunting excursion, King Yayati approached that Soon thereafter, while wandering in the forest on a hunting excursion, King Yayati approached that well to drink some water. When he saw naked Devjani within, the surprised king very kindly offered her his upper cloth and then lifted her out of the well by taking hold of her hand. After being rescued, Devjani spoke to Yayati in a voice saturated with love and affection. "O great hero, by taking my hand, you have accepted me as your married wife. because our relationship has been arranged by providence, let me not have to be touched by others. After I cursed Kacha, the son of Brihaspati, he also cursed me by saying that I would not get a Brahmana for a husband. Therefore, our union is quite appropriate. Devjani had spoken in this way because although an Anuloma marriage between a Brahmana man and a Kshatriya girl was socially accepted, a Pratiloma marriage between a Kshatriya man and a Brahmana girl was not. Actually, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by Shastra, King Yayāti did not like it. But because his meeting with Devjani had been providentially arranged and he was attracted by her youthful beauty, King Yayati agreed to accept her nonetheless. The two then parted ways and Devjani went home crying to her father. When Sukracharya heard from his daughter about Sarmishta's misbehavior, his mind became very aggrieved. While condemning professional priesthood, which obliged him to take sides in such a childish matter, and praising the life of Uchavritti, collecting grains from the field, Sukracharya took his daughter and departed for the king's palace. Intelligent King Brishaparva could understand that Sukracharya was coming to either chastise or curse him. And so, before his arrival, he went out into the street and fell down at his preceptor's feet in an attempt to pacify him. Sukracharya was certainly angry for a few minutes, but upon seeing Vrisaparva's very humble and submissive behavior, he gave up his wrath and then said, "My dear king, please fulfill Devjani's desire, because she is my daughter. I cannot neglect her." Vrisaparva gave his consent and awaited Devjani's words. Sukracharya's daughter then expressed her desire as follows. Devjani was saying, expressed her desire as follows. "Whenever I marry, by the order of my father, my friend Sarmishta must go with me as a maid servant, along with all her companions." Vrisaparva wisely thought that Sukracharya's displeasure would bring danger, whereas his pleasure would bring material gain. Therefore, when his preceptor gave his daughter in marriage to King Yayati, Vrishaparva had Sarmishta go with Devjani, along with thousands of other women, to serve her like a slave. At the time of Devjani's marriage, Sukracharya warned Yayati, "My dear king, take my advice and never allow this girl Sarmishta to lie down with you in your bed." At the time of Devjani's marriage, Sukracharya warned Yayati, means his son-in-law. Sukracharya warned his son-in-law Yayati, "My dear king, take my advice and never allow this girl Sarmishta to lie down with you in your bed." In due course of time, Devjani gave birth to a nice son. Upon seeing this, Sarmishta also desired to beget children, and so she approached Yayati in a secluded place at the appropriate time for conception and begged him to give her a son. The king was well aware of the religious principle that a Kshatriya cannot refuse any woman who approaches him for the purpose of begetting offspring. A Kshatriya cannot refuse any woman who approaches him for the purpose of begetting a offspring. Thus, in spite of remembering his father-in-law's warning, Yayati considered the union with Sarmishta to be the desire of the Supreme, and so he engaged in sexual intercourse with her. Later on, however, when proud Devjani understood from various sources that Sarmishta was pregnant by union with her husband, she became frenzied with rage. After storming out of the palace, she departed for her father's house. Lusty King Yayati followed his wife, and after catching up to her, tried to appease her by speaking very sweet words and massaging her feet. But Devjani was not to be pacified by such means, and so he continued on until she reached her father's cottage. When Sukracharya understood the whole situation, he very angrily chastised King Yayati. You untruthful fool, lusting after women, because of your great fault, I hereby curse you to be immediately attacked by invalidity and old age. King Yayati pleaded, O learned and worshipable Brahmana, I have not yet satisfied my lusty desires with your daughter. Sukracharya could understood that his curse was also not in the interest of his lusty daughter. Therefore, he replied, as a concession, you may exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you. Through Devjani, Yayati had begotten two sons, Yadu and Turvashu, and through Sarmishtha he had begotten three, Dryuhu, Anu, and Puru. Yayati first went and requested his eldest son, My dear Yadu, please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity, for I have not yet satisfied my sexual desires. If you are merciful to me, I can utilize your youth and thus enjoy life for a few more years. Yadu was ready to accept his father's request, but because he was very eager to engage fully in the devotional service of the Lord and accelerate the appearance of Lord Krishna in his dynasty, he was afraid that an unsatiated material desires might prove to be an impediment. He therefore replied, My dear father, I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, he cannot attain renunciation. Unless one enjoys material happiness, he cannot attain renunciation. Yadu's refusal of his father's order was religious. On the other hand, Turvashu, Jihu, and Anu irreligiously refused Yayati's proposal due to considering their flickering youthful life to be eternal. Next, Yayati approached Puru, who was younger than these three brothers but more qualified. The king requested, My dear son, do not become disobedient like your elder brothers, for that is not your duty. Puru replied, Who in this world can repay the debt he owes his father? It is by his mercy that one gets a human body, whereby he can become an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A son who anticipates his father's desire and then executes it is first class. One who acts only after receiving his father's order is second class, and one who executes his father's command irreverently is third class. But a son who flatly refuses to obey his father's order is no better than his stool. A son who flatly refuses to obey his father's order is no better than his stool. Puru regretted that he did not accept his father's proposal before being asked to do so, but still he was determined not to become the lowest type of son, who is no better than his father's stool. After taking Puru's youth in exchange for his old age, King Yayati became the emperor of the entire earth, consisting of 7 islands, and ruled his subjects just like an affectionate father. With unimpaired senses, Maharaj Yayati enjoyed the greatest amount of material happiness possible in the company of his dear wife. By engaging her mind, words, and body as well as various paraphernalia, Devjani always brought her husband as much sensual pleasure as he desired. King Yayati also performed many sacrifices and gave abundant charity to the Brahmanas for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, who is the reservoir of all the demigods. Although externally King Yayati appeared to be very fond of material enjoyment, internally he desired to become an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and thus he worshipped the Lord without material motive. Maharaj Yayāti ruled the earth for 1000 years, and yet, despite engaging his mind and senses in enjoying material objects for such a long period of time, he found that he could never achieve satisfaction. Although the king had been very much attached to women, in due course of time he became disgusted with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects. While thus thinking of renouncing the materialistic way of life, Yayati narrated the following story to his beloved wife. O daughter of Sukracharya, please listen as I tell you about someone who was just like me. While wandering in the forest, a he goat happened by chance to approach a well, and within it he saw a sea goat helplessly standing, having fallen in as a result of her past karma. After planning how to get the sea goat out of the well, the he goat laboriously dug up the earth with his horns so that she could easily climb up. After being rescued, the sea goat, who had very nice hips, wanted to accept the he goat as her husband because of his handsome body, nice mustache, and expertise in discharging semen during sexual intercourse. Along with this sea goat, many other sea goats desired to have the he goat as their husband, and thus, in their association, he engaged in erotic activities, completely forgetting his real business of self realization. Once, when the sea goat saw her husband engaged in sexual affairs with another sea goat, she could not tolerate it. Considering the he goat to be a hard-hearted, temporary friend only interested in enjoying sense gratification, the sea goat departed for the residence of a Brahmana who was the maintainer of another sea goat. The aggrieved he goat, being subservient to his wife, followed her on the road, and although he tried his best to flatter her, she could not be pacified. The Brahmana angrily cut off the he goat's dangling testicles, but then, at his request, he later on rejoined them by utilizing his mystic power. Thereafter, the he goat continued to enjoy with the sea goat for many years, and yet, even now, he has not become satisfied. King Yayati continued, my dear wife, I am exactly like the sea goat. Sorry, my dear wife, I am exactly like that he goat. For I have been captivated by your beauty and thus have forgotten the real task of self realization. A lusty person cannot satisfy his mind, even if he possesses enough of everything that is desirable within this world. Just as supplying ghee to a fire does not diminish it, but instead increases it more and more, the endeavor to quench lusty desires by continual enjoyment only aggravates them. Therefore, one must voluntarily cease from trying to fulfill his desires for sense enjoyment if he at all hopes to get free from them. Of course, it is very difficult for those who are too attached to material enjoyment to give up the activities of sense gratification. Even when one is invalid due to old age, he cannot give up desires for sensual pleasure, for that has been his lifelong habit. Still, one who actually wants to become happy must give up such unsatisfied desires, knowing them very well to be the cause of all tribulations. One should not allow himself to sit on the same seat with even his own mother, sister, or daughter, for the senses are so strong that even though one may be very advanced in knowledge, he may become attracted by desire for sex. One should not allow himself to sit on the same seat with even his own mother, sister, or daughter, for the senses are so strong that even though one may be very advanced in knowledge, he may become attracted by desires for sex. My dear wife, even though I have spent 1000 years enjoying sense gratification, my desire to enjoy such pleasure still increases daily. Therefore, I shall now give up these desires and meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, free from the dualities of mental concoction and devoid of false prestige. I shall wander in the forest along with the animals. One who knows that material happiness, whether pious or impious, on earth or in heaven, in this life or the next, is temporary and useless, and thus should not even be thought of. And so, what to speak of engaged in is the true knower of the self. One who knows that material happiness, whether pious or impious, on earth or in heaven, in this life or the next, is temporary and useless, and thus should not even be thought of. And so, what to speak of engaged in is the true knower of the self. After speaking to his wife, King Yayāti, who was now detached from all material desires, called for his son Puru and returned to him his youth in exchange for his old age. Yayati then enthroned Puru as the emperor of the world and made his elder sons subordinate kings of the various directions. Thus, even though King Yayati had become accustomed to sense enjoyment, due to having indulged in it for many years, he gave it up entirely in a moment. Just as a bird flies away from its nest as soon as its wings have grown. Even though King Yayati had become accustomed to sense enjoyment, due to having indulged in it for many years, he gave it up entirely in a moment, just as a bird flies away from its nest as soon as its wings have grown. This was possible because King Jayati completely surrendered himself at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus achieved his original position as the Lord's associate. After hearing Jayati's story of the he goat and the she goat, even though it was presented as joking between husband and wife, Devjani understood its meaning and was also awakened to self realization. As a faithful wife, she followed the path of her husband and thus also gave up her imaginary position in the material world and fixed her mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, by the mercy of King Yayati, Devjani was not only rescued from a well, but she achieved liberation from material bondage as well. By the mercy of King Yayati, Devjani was not only rescued from a well, but she achieved liberation from material bondage as well. Hare Krishna.